focus of this panel is just getting into a subsection of what we talked about at the last panel, which is user experience. That's what really gets people into gaming at the end of the day. So to start things off, y'all know who I am. I've been talking a long time. But if we could have the panel introduce themselves, please, maybe starting with you, Michael.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael. I'm the Director of Corporate Development at Come2Us. Come2Us is a mobile gaming company started in 1998. We started off with feature phones, and we went on to the App Store. We have a hit title called Summoner's War, and that's been in service for over 9 years now and has done over $3 billion in revenue. And largely due to the success of that, we've been able to transition our company into a transmedia company where we do entertainment and music as well. And our CEO and chairman came out publicly saying, hey, Web3 is the future, and we're going all in on Web3. So every single game moving forward, except for the licensed titles, are going to have some sort of a Web3 element to it.
I'm Akshay, co-founder, CEO of Halliday. Halliday is a company focused on making Web3 games and virtual worlds as accessible as possible. So working on onboarding, working on engagement, helping players in games make it as easy as possible to get into these games and really, spend more time, engage, and grow with the community.
Hi, my name is Canaan. I'm the CEO and founder of Stardust. We started in about 2018, seen the ups, the downs, the sideways of NFTs and blockchain technology. We help game developers integrate NFTs in games, specifically looking at game developers with tens of millions of players and above. And so we are trying to really make Web3 accessible to the mainstream player so they get all of the benefits and none of the costs. And happy to be on this panel today.
Hello, I'm Tim Dierchxsens, co-founder and CEO at Venly. We're actually quite similar to Stardust in that case, as in making Web3 as accessible as possible for actually any industry. And we also have a vertical within gaming, so also creating gaming SDKs and integrating into gaming platforms so that developers don't need to deal with any of the blockchain technology.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much for being here today. All right, so no shortage of topics and issues and probably complaints when it comes to Web3 gaming user experience. But let's talk about, I think one of the core issues in the space is, can you play a Web3 game without connecting your wallet?
In my opinion, yes, you can do that, but it's also a question as when are you going to manage and hold your digital assets and whether you want to have the responsibility to do it yourself. In the end, if you want to have an asset, you need to have a wallet. But it should be behind the scenes, in my opinion. Right now, everything with blockchain, we're putting the cart before the horse, as in technology first. In our opinion, technology should always be under the hood. So use the power, but have the benefits where you don't break the UI for the end user.
Yeah.
I'd have to echo that. I mean, I think it's a prerequisite for players to be able to play a blockchain-based game without connecting a wallet. A wallet is a new form of identity, but when you go into a game, there's a reason there are multiple login methods. User password, login with Google, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. Login with a wallet is another form of identity, a pervasive identity you can take from app to app, but that doesn't mean it should be a prerequisite at any point to playing a game. It should be an option for players, a great option, but never a prerequisite.
I'd love to just echo that, exactly the same feeling there. I think that it's important to kind of distinguish between what a wallet is and what accounts generally are. Accounts are more of this abstract idea of what we're thinking of. You need to have an account to log into a game. But wallets are just one manifestation of what an account can be. That's a very good idea. It's been around for a long time, but it's not the only way to do it. And what's exciting about the space right now is we're really going in deeper. We're thinking about what are other forms of manifestations of what accounts can be. How else can you log into a game? How else can you store your assets? How else can you really think about this? And that's great that we're having this conversation now and thinking about how to make this a better experience.
I have nothing else to add. Those are all great.
That's fantastic. So you guys are starting to touch upon sort of an alternative form of sign-on that we're seeing become more and more popular. It's very hard to get away from the fact that a lot of us have lived our digital lives with big tech. And so we have a very well-established identity management system, whether it's Google, Facebook, sort of these single sign-on tools. And a lot of the new crop of identity management tools coming up in Web3 leverage the single sign-on. How do you think, first of all, developers and then users square that with the fact that Web3 in many ways agitates against Web2?
Yeah, it's another form of friction, and that's really what free-to-play has done well is figure out how to get rid of all the friction. And then all of a sudden with Web3 and with the rise of Web3 gaming, somehow that whole model kind of turned itself up on its head. And then now we're seeing it kind of go back the other way and realizing that no, we need to have it easy for people to be able to enjoy the game. I think the Web2 side of things, being able to easily get in and enjoy the game and try it out before having to do anything with Web3 is going to be the part where we need to figure out in order for us to start to get any sort of mass adoption.
I think one of the reasons that Web2 game developers maybe were so frustrated with Web3 was Web2 game development was all about, and still is about, lowering the friction to make the player enjoy the game more, spend more money. In Web3, we kind of turned that on its head. We said the more friction the game had, the more money the game would make. Hyper-financialized, bring in the whales from Web3, and we're really moving from the financialization of Web3 games to going back to try and making them fun.
Yeah.
And we're lessening the friction, but that's caused a lot of strife in the industry. And really large game developers that we talk to, they don't understand it. And they didn't understand what Web3 gaming was all about, because frankly, it was sometimes not about gaming, but just financialization of these games and financial, gamified DeFi. And while that is fine, I think we are now seeing the worlds collide, and really excited for the next 3 to 5 years and what it brings to the industry.
Just to add to that, because it's really interesting, the free-to-play side, spent years really figuring out the funnel, and then all of a sudden, you introduce these friction points, and you're going backwards, and free-to-play companies kind of, there's a joke where they're actually data companies, taking form of as
nice
a game.
Characters in the foreground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you see that kind of friction, and when you see what happens to the funnel when you introduce that kind of friction, it just doesn't make any sense. That being said, the potential of what can be possible with it, I think, is what attracts a lot of these free-to-play companies to it. But it's just, that's why these companies exist, is to make that experience a lot smoother and kind of create that funnel again.
I definitely wanted to double click on something that was said by Canaan just a few minutes ago, and Michael was adding on to, one of the reasons we're thinking about a lot of this right now is because we've, for whatever reason, added so many extra frictions in Web3, and that was kind of the, when you financialize a game, what the goal is financialization, when there are these sorts of goals that are your ultimate target, there are incentives to do so. But I was having an interesting conversation last night with one of the other speakers here, and we're talking about how the goals of games are changing. Financialization is not the only thing anymore. Someone on the last panel was also mentioning, there's so many other reasons to use a blockchain beyond just financialization for a game. It can be for building community. It can be as a store of state, as a state machine in itself. I think the next generation of games that are building in this space, building in Web3, are really trying to explore the alternative use cases beyond financialization. Why else should we use a blockchain, and what else can we do? What else is there in the magic that we have yet to explore? So as the space starts going down this route, obviously it just makes natural sense that we roll back some of the UX complexities and difficulties that we've added for financialization, and really think about how to make that as easy as possible in line to make the games fun.
Yeah. I actually don't think it was all about financialization. What I do think is you need revolution before you have evolution. And if you take that in mind, it's not about Web 2 versus Web 3. It's about using the power of Web 2 and the power of Web 3 combined. But in the first few years, that's very hard to do because technology-wise, it's super complex. And once you understand that we can use power of Web 2 and use power of Web 3, try to combine that and synergize that, we're going to be talking about digital ownership. We're going to be talking about using a catalyst to trade assets. And that's not necessarily about financialization. It's about a use case where you're taking a player, a consumer, and bringing that into your ecosystem as a stakeholder and treating them fairly and differently.
Well, I tend to agree with that. I will say, though, I think one of the cool, it goes back to something Rebecca was saying earlier, that as a joke, that we're rebranding from crypto to Web3 nowadays.
And I think we should altogether get rid of the word Web3. I know there's it's because we want to distinguish, the difference. I understand that, but it only kind of leaves that friction mark, just out there to be, for others to say, oh, this is something different and we don't want to kind of touch.
And eventually the hope is that, you just become, this becomes gaming. It's not Web3 gaming or blockchain gaming. This is the future of gaming itself. But just to go back on what I was saying there, the idea was that we first discovered when blockchains first came about and gaming was developing here, like financialization may not have been the end goal at the time, but it was the easiest thing to do. That was the easiest application, the easiest reason to build a game on that.
The revolution.
Exactly. And now we're going back and realizing that, oh, wait, there's actually so much more magic hidden away here. There's so much more we can do. It doesn't necessarily just have to be this.
3-4 years ago, it was all about public versus private blockchains. That was the battle that was going on. Now it's Web 2 versus Web 3. And I think it's a nice narrative, but in the end, that's not the end goal. It's creating something of value for users and using a technology to do so.
I think one of the most interesting things I've seen in the journey since many years ago when both of our companies started was we've always separated Web 2 and Web 3 game development because we haven't been honest with ourselves that we didn't quite know what the benefits of Web 3 were to Web 2 game developers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ownership being incredible for players, maybe for developers as well, but we always pitched it as different and therefore everybody must adapt. And while that's hard, it's very hard to make that revolution a reality, unless there are Axie Infinities every single week for the next 52 weeks, which unfortunately there aren't. What is happening in the game industry right now is we've seen the first mobile decline in TAM ever from 99 billion to 92. And it surrounds IDFA and a change Apple made to increase privacy on iPhones, to which Google is fast following. And it makes acquiring users much more difficult for your game. And what we're doing at Stardust and really thinking about is how do we marry the Web3 technology that we've built with many of the problems that game developers are having in Web 2. You've seen huge consolidations from Savvy Group buying Scopely, and you'll see more coming in the future because of how hard it is to acquire users and surrounding just understanding who users are in your game and acquiring millions more. And that, if we can crack that code, it really makes Web 2 and Web 3 gaming just gaming. Right? And making games more successful is what both sides are about and just need to come together to align on the best way to get there.
All right, fascinating. Okay, so we've been focusing on the wallet so far. If I can take you through the rest of the user story. So we're thinking about onboarding wallets. Let's talk about payments. So one would think that there are sufficient options at this point for payment on-ramp, off-ramps. Do you think that that's true, or are there further improvements that you'd like to see?
That's a good question, but then you have to ask payments for what? Payments for the in-game heart token or the NFT?
No, actually, let's do both. Let's do the token piece of the in-game currency and then the NFT assets.
So everything should be around AML. Mm-hmm. As long as you have that covered, especially in Europe. Yeah. Then there are options, but it's very hard to get approval to do something like this. Mm-hmm. Gaming is high risk, and there aren't many options for gaming to include payment providers that can say, well, you're allowed to create your in-game token. It's not going to be a security. It is classified as a utility. Oh, by the way, we want on and off ramps for NFTs. You're going to allow peer-to-peer transactions, but you're not doing KYB or KYC or AML transaction monitoring. Yeah. So there's still a lot that needs to be covered before banks are going to be comfortable to allow on and off ramps, or we all move to crypto and that gets regulated a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. I think to your point, a lot of it needs to be improved. There are huge questions surrounding our token securities. Do we need KYC on everybody? There are on-ramps and off-ramps, and they're quite good ones, and there'll be better ones. I want to speak to one of the concerns that I hear is not actually around the word on-ramp. It's about the word off-ramp. Mm-hmm. Game developers from the Web 2 space have always been putting money into the ecosystem, never taking it out. Yeah. And it's one of the huge concerns we see from game developers, and it's a little bit of a misconception. I'll actually go back to a quick example, GameStop in 2006. When they started selling used games, there was a huge outcry from game creators because they said, if people can resell my game on the store shelf for $20, why would they ever buy it new for $60? And there was a huge study done on this, and what they actually found was secondary resale market helped primary market and actually increase the TAM. And so while we see the on-ramp and off-ramp technology improving, we see a lot of game developers very hesitant to put off-ramps in their game. They want the money coming in, never going out. But I think that for game developers, and when the technology gets there, to have money and tokens transact seamlessly into games, out of games, and across games, we're going to see a huge influx into the market, not only of better technology providers like you're already seeing with PayPal and PiUSD and others, but also Apple and Google start doing on-ramps and off-ramps themselves. Give it 10 years, but it's my outside bet.
I think I'll take this question and focus on another aspect, which is how the UX works for the user in terms of how embedded it is. Nobody wants to leave a game to go try to add more money or take off money from the game. And no game wants their players having to do that. If they leave the game, God knows whether they're going to come back. There's a million things they could be doing. There's a million alternatives, and you want them to stay in the game to have to do everything. So that's one of the biggest things these days that a lot of game studios that we're hearing about are thinking about in terms of payments. Like, can you make the experience embedded? And especially for mobile game studios, that's an even bigger deal. With mobile especially, Web3 has always been a challenge. You know, every time you're trying to play a game, even to sign transactions or anything for more of these on-chain games, you have to switch back to MetaMask, leave the game, go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it becomes a massive, massive pain. And now bring in on-ramping, off-ramping. You have to go into a whole another app. You have to have some sort of pop-ups. It's a crazy experience. So in our opinion, like that's one of the big things that is currently top of mind. Like that's what the industry is working on resolving. How can you make this entire experience embedded and seamless for the player?
Wonderful. Michael, anything to add to that? Or
I kind of touched upon this yesterday, but you know, and as everyone mentioned, like this is that friction that I've been talking about. That even if there is a hit title that comes from Web 2 that introduces some Web 3, it's so hard to convert because of this. And you know, of course, you know, companies like, you know, my fellow panelists exist for that reason, you know, to make that seamless. But right now we're at this infancy stage where it still requires multiple steps. And as I mentioned early on, the funnel, the more steps you require, that funnel, you know, you're starting to lose users like that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the ultimate question is, which is the main topic of this of the panel itself, is like how do you make that UX and UI seamless? And you know, that's the journey we're on. You know, that's exactly what we're trying to do, and I think that solving that will greatly improve the adoption of this whole space.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to one last major aspect, I think, of user experience, and then let's talk about industry structure and how it's really entrenching maybe the more established players. So last thing is game state. How important is game state to gamers, do you think? Being able to verify game state in real time on chain, being able to have a record of it, an accurate record of it, et cetera.
I think it becomes an industry norm. I don't think as of today, honestly, the average gamer cares, right? Frankly, my grandma just wants to open Candy Crush on her phone and play. She's not looking to make sure it's like, you know, unique and tradable and improvable and everything else. You have some incredible on-chain game engines. I think Argus is one that is doing some incredible things, just on-chain provability and state and everything else. State on-chain, I don't think, is as important to an individual player, but I think the benefits that come with it, such as composable on-chain logic, such as, you know, a UGC ecosystem in which someone builds a rentable protocol, but then someone builds some sort of, you know, fractionalization on top of it. That in itself is actual value to players if the underlying technology for that is provable state on chain. More power to it. But I think, you know, it's like asking if a player really cares about, you know, the 1 gigabyte, you know, optic cable going under the ocean when they're playing a game. They gain the benefits from it. They probably would enjoy it if you explained it to them, but that's how I would call provable state. It's extremely important, I think, for some of the underlying innovations in the space, but it is not what people care about. They only care about those innovations built on top.
Yeah. Yeah.
100% agree with that. And I'm like, my question is like, how do you think game state should look to the user from a user's perspective? What does that even mean? Like how I'm just throwing it out there. Like what, how, and then again, why would they care? So
yeah. It really becomes a thing where so what we've seen from our gamers is the fact that they are able to see the NFT transactions, for instance, whether they are accruing NFTs, whether they're selling those NFTs, whether they're losing the NFTs because they've lost lives in gameplay or something like that. It's something that they appreciate seeing in the Block Explorer. So the fact that it updates in real time gives them a lot of comfort. Now, having said that, I think it's one of those things where the question is for the gamer, is it sort of I just like am addicted to tracking my score, because that's always nice, right? But I am with a lot of people who've spoken at this summit so far and with the panel that most gamers are not playing a game to make money or to be active day traders or anything like that. They're doing it for entertainment and escape. Right?
And then you said something very, very, very important. You said some of the Web3 gamers like tracking those states on the Block Explorer.
Yeah.
Has anyone tried looking at a Block Explorer? Do you think normal people understand when they see the Block Explorer, right?
So growing up, my favorite thing was I tried to get Barry Bonds' signature on a baseball, and I missed it. Someone elbowed me, and it's okay. But went to spring training camp, and I was always hold up the baseball and try and get players to sign it. In gaming, we've never really had that. You can't cryptographically and digitally sign an actual game item in the Web2 world. And blockchain offers that ability in the terms that like a streamer like Ninja can actually cryptographically sign a skin in Fortnite. I can grab a cape that was used by, what's another one I watched? Tfue, right? In Fortnite. And that in and of itself is something really awesome. And that comes from something like provable state on chain. Is someone cryptographically signing something? Has someone used a cape in-game? That is provable state, maybe to kill a huge boss, or it was the first one in-game. That is provable on-chain. The fact that it is great, but obviously the concept of having a signed skin is the result, is the innovation, and that's what people are very excited for.
And then tying it back into the UI UX part of it, you know, and then let's make it easy for people to understand, like, oh, this is what it means when it's when you can see that it's on chain and you can prove it, right? Like, because right now, if any normie were to look on a Block Explorer, they would have no idea what that means, right? So kind of making that experience also very easy for users to understand.
I think I'd mostly agree with this kind of understatement right now that disagreement on the panel that it's not necessarily hugely important today, but I do think state has a huge, huge potential for what's going to be important down the road. As this common recurring theme that we're kind of exploring on this panel is this blockchain as a technology for the gaming industry is kind of like an onion. We're peeling it off layer by layer and discovering what's really inside. Like, here are all these new things that we can do with this technology. And while today I would agree that state is not a massively important thing for a lot of the types of games that are being built now, I think this is actually one of the fundamental promises that blockchain holds for what games can be in the future. When we're talking about people spending more and more time, more and more of their life, it becomes a more complete experience. That games are beyond one-time experiences. They're not single player. They're more similar to what like a virtual world in a sense. That your economic state, your physical state, like a lot of that is online. I think at that point, state is going to be very important. Like in the real world today, I want to be able to keep track of my state. In a similar sense, when a lot of our existence is in these virtual worlds, which we're super excited about, we think at that point that state will be just as important to keep track of. And hopefully by that point, we'll have a better solution than going on Block Explorer to figure it out.
I think real-time in-game, I'm less worried about that. Maybe some players are, but the majority, I agree, would not be. We're also sitting outside of gaming, and we're looking into NFTs for luxury goods. And then there are different types of how you can do physical and digital assets together. One is you have luxury wines, you have luxury whiskeys or something like that. And you treat that as an investment, and you can create your NFT saying this is your proof of ownership, this is your certificate. You bought it, it can appreciate, depreciate in value. And as long as the wine has not left the warehouse, then that state remains the same, right? So we're going to trade it against the value of the proof of ownership of the asset behind it. But at a certain moment, if you say, well, now I'm going to claim it, the state changes, and then you really need to be able to see, okay, the asset value of the physical asset tying the NFT is gone. Now it's just a collectible. Like the stamp has been stamped. So
You guys are doing this for real-world physical assets or like the more premium virtual assets too?
Real-world physical assets, our clients are.
I mean, that you better keep track if you don't want to lose that expensive, expensive wine. But I mean, I think just as exciting will be when in virtual worlds you start having these real virtual assets like virtual land, virtual homes, things that are more pricey down there. You sure as hell don't want to lose state at that point.
Yeah, I think there's a big, like, either it's on-chain or it's off-chain, and people are arguing. In, like, 1990, no one would have been able to tell you what connecting you to the internet would have actually brought you 20 years from that day. Nobody could have understood that because you actually spin up a server that's connected to the internet and put in a DNS entry, Google just works. And it sounds obvious today, but you go back to that point. And thinking about that today, we don't quite know what on-chain state could possibly bring us. There are incredible advantages that we can see, but it's too early to tell how those will manifest, to your onion example. And I think that as we go forward, just because we can't see what it would bring us does not mean it should not be understood as a potential benefit of the technology today.
Amazing. All right, so we only have a couple minutes left on this panel. Let me switch it up a little bit to talk about the industry. So, iteration in just general technology can happen very, very quickly. I think in Web3, while we have this incredible dynamism, which everyone agrees with, if you're trying to keep track of the latest technology narratives or the latest product trends, et cetera, it's very hard even when you're in the industry full time. However, I do think that one of the things that UI UX problems have highlighted to us is you have a lot of incumbents, they have a lot of network effects, and the product is like not 100%. And then you have these startups that are looking to improve on the product features, but maybe they don't have the blessing of the central foundation. Maybe it's an incredible struggle to get a network effect even within a particular ecosystem, let alone go multi-chain. So we're all entrepreneurs on this stage. How do you address it in your project? And then how would you advise startups that are looking to build potentially the next great wallet or the next great payment on-ramp? How would you advise them to think about go-to-market?
Think before you leap.
Yeah.
It's as an entrepreneur, I can say it's such a challenging but rewarding journey.
Yeah.
One good thing that I think for new entrepreneurs is when we started back in 16, 17, 18, there was almost nothing except Ethereum. So we had to invent everything and try to solve all of these problems. They do have the benefit to see the past 4 or 5 years of innovation that we've been pushing through, and they actually have a head start with that. Mm-hmm. So the space is young, it's nascent, there's a lot of opportunity to grow within the ecosystem. Blockchain is still such a small niche compared to the rest of the technological landscape.
Yeah.
So I would say go for it, look at what's already there, and see what the problems are. Because in the end, we're solving a problem, and you have to think of for who are you solving the problem for. Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of people reticent to get started because there is a big player in the space, maybe a huge player, maybe another startup, whatever it is. I mean, speaking from my personal experience, we had 10 people when our competitors had 100 plus, tens of millions of dollars. And look, you will never have the most amount of money raised. You'll never have the most Twitter followers. You'll never have the largest amount of customers in many instances. But what will get you through it is if you keep relentless focus on what your customer and what their needs are as a business and that you are fulfilling their needs, you will be successful no matter what. And I think that, from my personal opinion, has been the largest value driver in my journey and how we've gotten to this stage is not looking around us and understand, wow, they have so many more games, or wow, they have so many more Twitter likes, or wow, look at their big raise. But just doubling down on providing value and success for your customers. If you do that, you'll be successful no matter what.
I think one of the kind of premises of the question I want to address is that it's necessarily that the incumbents are out to get you, where in reality, like, this is still surprisingly a very small space, and it's still, like, the pie is still very, very big and fat and yummy. And it's not, like, oftentimes in this industry, people much bigger than you will collaborate with you. Like, it's, we're kind of all, the rising tide raises all ships. It's always great to just reach out, have those conversations. I mean, people are very collaborative in the space. People are working together, and if they're not, chances are they won't be around soon.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, my thing is just ask, just go out and ask, whatever it is. You know, like what is there to lose? You know, and like what everyone else was saying, space is early. You know, it's a big enough space for everyone to grow together, and I think more often than not, you'll find people that are willing to help.
Yeah, from a personal perspective, and something to know if anyone wants to be an entrepreneur. 6 years later, after I started the company, raised a lot of money, a lot of people, a lot of customers, all that stuff. It is still a struggle every single day. Sometimes there are ups, there are downs, there are sideways. Everybody goes through them, and so understanding that. Like, you are not alone, right? Apple went through this, Amazon went through this, right? And you'll go through this also is a unique opportunity, and you should take it.
Yep, absolutely. All right, that's a great note to end on. Thank you guys so much for being a part of a great panel, and thank you all. And if you're tuning in from home, we should have mentioned this earlier, but apologies. If you have any questions for the panelists, or if you have any questions that would like to be addressed in the summit throughout the day, feel free to do so. Thanks for tuning in. And once again, please give a round of applause to our wonderful panelists.